Every year, more than 20,000 Jewish children, teens, and young adults gather to create a more just, compassionate, inclusive, and sustainable world. We're talking about the Reform Movement's 17 summer camps, youth groups, and immersive travel programs, all of which come under the leadership of one man, my guest today. Welcome to Pivot, a program of the Toby Center for Jewish Peoplehood at the Osher Marin JCC. In videotaped interviews and live Zoom events, we will explore this unique moment and where we, as people and as a Jewish community, go from here. We hope that Jewish wisdom can help to guide us. Today I'm speaking with Ruben Arquilevich, who, after running URJ Camp Newman for 25 years in Santa Rosa, now serves as the Vice President for URJ Camps, NIFTY, and Immersives. Now, in the interest of full transparency, I'm a fan. Ruben and I worked closely together on the Camp Newman board for over 4 years, and in his understated and unassuming way, he taught me more about leadership than anyone has before or since. Have I ever told you that, Ruben?
No, but you're going to make me cry. So
it is really true. It is true. I reference things I learned from you on a regular basis. Ruben, these past few months have been extraordinary. I mean, dealing with a global pandemic, unprecedented. And when you are essentially in charge of making the decision of if camp will proceed across the country and how it will proceed, I can't even imagine what your days were like. Can you give us a glimpse?
Sure. Well, first, it's really wonderful to be here with you and talk about something so sacred and so dear to our hearts. It's been these last 3 to 4 months has been unimaginable, really challenging, and it's resulted in a really sad time for tens of thousands of Jewish children and teens, families, young adults, the faculty, and the whole community, all the stakeholders who surround the magic, these spiritual oases that we call our camps and our programs in Israel. And we know through data and we know through stories that if you want to raise somebody to love Judaism and to be connected to Jewish life, give them some years in camp, NIFTY, Israel, and we're well on our way. What's been so sad about this moment is we tend to talk about it from a loss of impact and Jewish identity formation and all of that, and that's true. But what really has been heartbreaking, what's broken my heart, is knowing all these kids, especially teens and young adults, who have been counting down their entire year to being together for their 2, 3, 4, 8 weeks. My daughter said it perfectly. She knew this was coming, and she would not talk to me about it. And she finally said, "Dad, I know we can't run camp this summer, but I would trade in 10 months for quarantine to have my 1 month at camp."
Ugh, it's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking, and there's just and it's on top of so much heartbreak this whole spring with so many young people missing out on really sacred rites of passage and milestones and graduations and special simchas and ceremonies. And yet, when I read and hear the thousands upon thousands of testimonials from kids and everybody surrounding kids around what camp means in their lives, it's overwhelming. It's been overwhelming. And yet, what rises out of all of it is gratitude and appreciation and love and an understanding of the value and the impact, and knowing that all of our decisions have been made based on the highest value, which is to protect human life, both for every single camper and adult who would participate in one of our camps, and for everybody whom they'd be coming home to. And once we had enough of the facts, once we've gone through several months of due diligence and exploration and studies and thousands of hours of conversations from our camp directors and their medical staff and their experts who were dealing with COVID. Once it became clear that COVID would be at camp and that you could not mitigate against that, that was really the tipping point. And that was just a risk we were not willing to take. And it threatened our most important value, which is health and safety of everybody. And even if one could mitigate for health and safety, we knew that we could not operate and deliver on the core mission and the program excellence. And we also knew we would not be able to be as inclusive as we'd want, because any single camper or staff member with any kind of health condition would not even be allowed to attend camp.
Well, camp is so intimate, right? And at least at URJ camps, in my experience, so physical. I mean, these kids are constantly, never mind the sports and all the interaction they have, but they are squished together. They become like one. So how do you preserve the magic when you can't gather in person?
Yeah, camp and NIPTY in Israel, these experiences, it is the opposite of physical distancing. And one way we've been able to continue to keep the magic alive, best that we can, is to understand that we're not socially distancing. We're not distancing how we build community. We're doing it through virtual engagement. There have been tens of thousands of young adults who have come together daily for the last 3 or 4 months, building community, seeing each other's faces, laughing together, crying together, expressing all their hopes and fears and feelings that they would be doing in person. And while it's not the same as being physically that close to each other, I've seen how it still makes a difference, and it's controlling what we can controlling. And it's doing what we can right now. And it's all, I'm actually watching people build community online so that when they come together in person, it'll be as if they've been cultivating that relationship even more so for a long time.
I feel that way with my synagogue right now. Which is your synagogue as well, Rodef Shalom. There's a strong connection happening online. I feel like I'm actually engaging more than I did when we were in person. I spoke to my 16-year-old niece yesterday, and she told me that she's going to be going to camp for 4 weeks this summer virtually. Tell me how you're doing that.
Well, this is for Camp Newman specifically, right, in this case. And so I can speak to a little bit of specifics of Camp Newman, but also all of our camps around the country. Unbelievable camp directors and their staffs who are so creative in taking what matters most to these kids and the staff, which is to connect with each other, make friendships, and learn and live Jewish values. So some camps are focusing in on arts, social justice, Jewish learning, music. It's basically taking a passion that a young person has and bringing that joy to it, because at the essence of camp, the secret sauce is the joy of Jewish living.
And the relationships.
And first and foremost, it's the friendships that they discover that become lifelong. I've attended now about a dozen Zoom simchas and Zoom funerals and Zoom shiva calls, almost everyone connected to people who met at camp, and now they're there by each other's side for both the greatest joys in life and the greatest sorrows. And it's all based on those relationships. So we can keep that going. The relationships we can keep going, and the joy and the laughter and the learning, we can keep that going.
Ruben, a few years ago you faced what at the time I think was the biggest challenge of your life when Camp Newman burned to the ground. This is a camp that you had built with others, but really under your leadership from the ground up. Tell us about that experience and how it changed you as a person.
Yeah. I've had a number of people ask me, how does all this compare with the fire? Because they're cognizant, and I feel like I'm very much still in the aftermath of that fire because it was just a couple of years ago, and that's still very, very present. I'm very present with all of that. Um, I think when the unimaginable happens on every single level, um, you can either respond with being a victim and being lost, or you can seek wisdom and the blessings in life and the love in life, and you can see the goodness that comes out of it, and you can work on yourself. And I continue to learn immensely, enormously from that experience. And like you said, I didn't build Camp Newman alone, and I certainly didn't feel alone in my grief and trauma. And I was so moved by, especially young people. They took all that trauma and they turned it into music and poetry, and prayer and art and gratitude. I think probably that might be the that I don't think there's a moment that goes by where I don't have an extra level of two things that I think came out of those ashes that actually help support me as I'm going through this really uh, unimaginable time that is also filled with fear and anxiety. And those two things is gratitude and empathy. And I have found that the fire was really, really, really traumatic and visceral and violent, but it was acute and quick and over. And then months of painful recovery and grieving, but now a lot of healing and a lot of love and gratitude towards rebuilding for a future. And I think that's another perspective I've learned is how many times in life do we actually get to take something that we've lost and help rebuild it again and be part of its recreation. And one of the lessons that I'm taking from all this is really, really hard. And yet we do have an opportunity to plant a new garden and to think about what matters most and how do you plant what matters most and how do you water and nourish what matters most and how do you do it slowly? How do you do it with greater presence? How can we take moments like this and actually make them a spiritual growth opportunity? I certainly found myself meditating more and praying more and connecting to the ultimate issues in life. And in the end of the day, both the fire and this moment, it's very humbling. We're reminded that we don't have control, and especially when it comes to nature, we don't have control. So what can we do? We can work on ourselves, and we can be kind, and we can love each other, and we can have empathy for everybody and everything, and probably most importantly for ourselves. I think that might be one of the most important lessons. It's very easy to forget about ourselves and to realize that moments like this, especially in this role that I'm playing now, I'm going to make mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes already, and I'm going to keep learning from them. And what I'm finding both challenging, but also an opportunity for both leaders in the Jewish community who are leading all of our incredible Jewish institutions, and for leaders in the secular world, but I think those especially connected to community and faith, is that I'm not sure if there's ever been a time, except for maybe like a world war or other times, where this is month 4 that we're dealing with peak stress, prolonged stress, and we're likely to be leading in this space for many, 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 many months to come. And how do we work on leading ourselves, and how do we work on following others from a greater place of even more patience, even more empathy, even more forgiveness? Because of the sheer nature of the situation, there's going to be more mistakes, there's going to be more mishaps, there's going to be less of an ability to create the process we want, and everything is there's a lot more pain.
Well, there's no precedent, therefore there's no roadmap, right? And the crisis that you and your colleagues have been facing over what to do in a global pandemic, obviously you have to keep kids and staff members safe. And then, as if that wasn't enough, one more unarmed black man was killed by police and our nation has collectively risen up. So, does the reform movement deal with systemic racism when it comes to youth programming?
It's been unbelievable starting this last weekend, following this murder and this moment, how my email, my inbox, my text messages, and my phones lit up with requests from teenagers and young adults by the hundreds and then the thousands across the globe who sought resources and support to be part of creating a more just, compassionate world, and specifically right now focused on Black Lives Matter and focused on racial justice. The reform movement has been a leader in this space for decades. And Rabbi Rick Jacobs and Jonah Pesner and a whole team have been 18 hours a day since that moment, all over the globe, helping us to lead. And specifically within camps and NIFTY and our Israel programs, there are hours of programs every day and opportunities to connect and to learn and to listen and to grieve and to begin taking action steps and action items together, from getting ready to vote, to pass laws, to reach out, to get educated, to reflect on ourselves and our own racial biases. And this is an incredibly sad and tragic moment. And I'm just praying, though, that this, that George Floyd's loss of life, that his, we say may somebody's memory be for a blessing, and I'm just praying that perhaps the only blessing here is that this might be the tipping point for some permanent change, knowing also that it's lifelong. I was just on a call with 400 URJ Camp and NIFTY teens and young adults and their families. It was led by the NIFTY teens, the entire program, and by the RAC, by the Religious Action Movement of the URJ, that really leads in this space around social justice. And the teens spoke about this being a lifelong journey, and that we're not going to go out and do something now and march and sign petitions and change laws and it's going to be done. This is the first step, but we're going to make change and we're going to stick to it. It's been really incredible.
It's impressive that as teens they can even see that the big picture, right? Sort of the long view. Ruben, what percentage of the 20,000 young people who are involved in the URJ are Jews of color? Because that is another whole area that I think the Jewish community has not done real well in thus far. We could do a whole lot better.
Yeah, I don't have the exact statistics handy. I do know that it's a place of focus and intentionality and growth. And I can share, just from my own awareness over a number of years, because racial justice has been a priority, again, really led by the RAC, by the Religious Action Center, but in partnership with camps and NIFTY, for all of our programming spaces to become more inclusive for Jews of color. And so I've seen significant growth in the number and the percentage. I hear statistically it could be as much as 25%, certainly in certain regions of the country. I can't speak to it across the whole country, but it's an example of a space where I will become even more intentional about actually counting and understanding, and just continuing to make that a priority as it has been, but this moment even elevating it more so. I guess I could share a personal story that I've been wrestling with around this. My closest friend, who was essentially a brother in high school, Mike Ward, a young black man, we became so close, and I was completely colorblind. In fact, I think he was the only the only person of color in our entire high school. And we became brothers. And he was also the first person who took me under his wing and gave me a little bit of self-esteem that I had none up until high school. That's a longer story. But we never actually talked about my Jewish identity and his black heritage. I was aware of it because he would share some stories about his father being discriminated against. And then we stayed connected as brothers. And when I say we were brothers, we were together almost every day at each other's families nonstop for years and years. We started to grow apart in college, and then we really grew apart. And then we tried to stay connected, but eventually he moved out of the region. And I know he chose to want to find a new path and a new community. And I believe it was to be more with his community, specifically his community of color. And every few years I would hear from him or through his wife, and I would try to find him and track him down. And our whole family would cry in an expression of love because we missed him so much. And I tried to open up to him at that phase of my life when I was in my 20s and 30s and even 40s to say, I'm so sorry that I was so colorblind. Like on one hand, one would say that was great. You were so oblivious to him being black that of course you're not racially biased. You don't even care. And yet, I think because I was in a way so colorblind that I didn't have the opportunity to have some real conversations with him.
It must have been tough for him to be the only black kid in the school. Yeah.
Yes. And then 7-8 years ago, I got a Facebook message from his wife that he had passed away.
Oh.
And it was really, really painful. So I reached out to her the other day, and I asked her if I could dedicate this moment in time to him, and also to for me to be articulate that sometimes being colorblind is not the answer either.
Well, we need to be proactive. Is anything done at camp to ensure that the experiences that Jews of color, that kids who come to camp who have black or brown skin are really included? Is it addressed at all?
So we have all sorts of incredible training tools that the RAC provides in partnership with Jews of color and in partnership with organizations like Bechol Lashon and other Jews of color throughout the country. One thing that I've learned, and I've heard from others who are leading this space, is that this isn't something for white people to solve. This is something to get into partnership from organically together with people of color to work together towards creating a more inclusive space. So we are very intentional about outreach and communication to these kids and these families, and then we're intentional with staff training on all levels, so that ultimately they feel the same love and the same inclusion that everybody does at camp, and that it's an opportunity to learn from each other.
And these are kids also that have been steeped already in a Jewish community, and so they probably are to some degree accustomed to being different in some ways.
Yes, and as much as that might be the case, usually they're coming from their local community, so it might be a particular school or a day school or whatever, some community they're coming from. When they come into a camp environment, especially if it's their first time, they will likely still be the minority, and in some cases a significant minority. And so I still have to believe it's got to be a little bit. It can be intimidating if there's not intentionality around that connection and that welcoming and that care. And certainly, as Jewish camps and our Jewish mission, to be welcoming is of as great of a value as we have. And so this is another example of living our values, and taking this moment in time to build upon that.
So here we are at this moment. Summer's going to be starting soon. We get through this summer. then what happens? Is it just a big unknown at this point? Do you continue to plan nifty events? And that's a Jewish youth group. What is it? National Federation of Temple Youth? Is that?
It's Jewish teens, Jewish teen leadership, focused very much around social justice, really
So,
partnering with the RAP.
so they will continue to meet virtually until they can meet in person? Is that basically the scenario?
Yeah, so part of this theme of it's time to plant a new garden, we've been going through our trauma and our sadness and our loss and our grieving and our writing about it and our prayers. And now we're still in that space, but simultaneously we're starting to step into a new garden, which includes staying connected virtually through the summer, virtual camps, virtual programs, um, seeking opportunities to come together in person when we can, in small groups and following health and safety guidelines. And then after the summer, continuing that experience, virtual connection, in person when we can, planning full steam ahead, nifty, a nifty convention where we'll bring together 600 teens from around the world to be together and to do social justice work and leadership work and our camp work and our reform movement work. And the countdown to summer 2021 begins now. We have hundreds and hundreds of families who have converted their summer 2020 deposits, tuition, payments, who have already forwarded that to hold space for 2021.
That's
Many have
fantastic. Yeah.
it's really been incredible, and many have added to it, knowing that donations are needed to support camps and Nifty at this difficult time. And we are planning ahead, and we're learning a lot, working with everybody that we need to work with. And we see camp next summer, and we see Nifty through the year. And camp is also year round. We see camp reunions, we see camp weekends, we see family camp, we see our Israel programs. COVID has been a really miserable, horrible curveball, but it's short term, and we'll get through this, and then we'll have a whole new level of embracing each other. I just can't. I imagine the first time everybody can come together for physical hugs, and it'll probably be the best feeling hug that anyone's ever had in their lives.
No question. One last thing, Ruben, do you have any advice for parents, perhaps with younger kids who are not, as savvy with connecting virtually with their friends? Any way that you can help families to keep Camp Magic alive this summer for kids who are so sorely missing it?
I've been thinking a lot about this actually, and I've been thinking about it from the perspective of not only for young children, but also the perspective of this is a time for parents. This is a time for parents to remember what it's like to be a kid. It's a time for all of us as parents to remember our playful side, our imaginative side, our creative side.
Which is tough when you're dealing with all the financial pressures that this pandemic has wrought.
Absolutely. It can be really tough. And yet this is such an important model for all of us as parents to be able to model for our children that even at a moment of despair and fear and anxiety and anger and frustration and turmoil and all of it, that we can still have joy in our lives, and we still have gratitude, and that we can still be silly and play and be imaginative. I feel it's an opportunity for parents to find that camp counselor in themselves and to take, specifically go outside, go on a walk in your neighborhood, or when you can go to the park or go to the beach or go to the hills. If it's a full moon, go for a walk. If there's no moon, look for the stars.
If it's Shabbat, make it special.
Make it special.
Dress in
sing,
white.
dance, be silly. Think about when you've laughed the most, when your kids have laughed the most. Play games, have fun. One of the silver linings is I walk almost every evening for about an hour, and I've never seen so many families and so many kids out and about in the neighborhood biking and walking and being with their parents. And there are I'm pretty sure I've seen some people write about it, but I think if one just Googles parents' activities with young children during this time, there's a lot of great ideas. But I think the challenge, and I think it's an opportunity, and I actually think in the future, we're going to look back to some moments here where we lost opportunities. And I think this opportunity for parents to re-engage with their children and on the silliness and on the playful side, because normally we would be normally handing this off to somebody else to do. And I think it's a mindset and an approach and a kavanah moment, probably more than anything else. And
Intention.
Yes, kavanah, intention.
Yeah. Ruben, thank you so much for your leadership. See, you agree with me now, audience, right? This is a leader. This is how a leader behaves. Optimism, empowerment. Thanks for the work that you do, for the 18-hour days that you've been putting in for the last 3.5 months, and for what you're doing for Jewish youth in America and Israel, North America, I would say. It's noticed, it's greatly appreciated. Ruben Arquilevich, again, Vice President for the Union of Reform Judaism's Camps, NIFTY, and Immersives. Be well.
Thank you, Joanne.